First of all, I do apologize in advance if you hear any kind of stuff. That's going to be basically notifications for emails and, Facebook and stuff like that. So I do apologize about that in advance if you hear that. But I want to talk about something, basically a response to what the guys over at Sonic Speed on the Sonic Speed YouTube channel, that's Sonic underline Speed, that's the name of the YouTube channel. Because 5 days ago, and I didn't get a chance to respond to this because, of course, as I've mentioned and you heard in the live stream, my mom was off work, so it's a little difficult to do that kind of stuff when she's off work. And even though I had opportunistic moments, over the weekend, at least yesterday on Sunday, as well as some other days, I particularly didn't want to chance it, if you catch my drift. Anyway. Basically, the title of the video was basically asking the question of, is Ken Penders going to get away with it? Or will Ken Penders get away with it? And what they're alluding to with that title is basically the Lara-Su Chronicles beginnings book. And not just that, but what Ken Penders plans to do further on. Because even though he is selling the Lara-Su Chronicles Beginnings book, which contains the initial Archie Sonic issues, which first introduced us to Mobius 25 years later, with alternate endings and everything inserted by him and his team, Ken Penders has gone on record in saying that not only does he want to do this with the Lara-Su Chronicles, or succeed with this, but he also wants to take it a tad further. And what I mean by a tad further is he wants to basically do the same thing. He wants to collect and re-release in trade paperback, graphic novel, collectible form all of Archie Sonic. And he has gone on record by saying that he will talk to whoever he's got to talk to, artistic-wise and writer-wise, to, see whether or not he can get them to, work along with him in getting, this, getting this made into a reality. Now, the guys over at Sonic Speed, at the Sonic Speed channel, because what these two guys do is they do reviews of Archie Sonic, IDW Sonic, and Fleetway Sonic, as well as also other very topical Sonic-related discussions. And when they brought this up, they got a good chuckle out of this because, one, they can kind of understand where Ken Penders is coming from with wanting to preserve a lot of this iconic, storytelling, from the first official Americanized Sonic comic book series by Archie. They can understand that. But what they also can understand is that Ken is walking a very thin line. And that thin line could potentially lead to a lawsuit by Sega. Even though, in their own way, they're kind of acknowledging that Sega may not do such a thing just yet. And Ken Penders, in his own words, has said that Sega won't even attempt to think about doing that because I guess he would have all right to prove them wrong. I don't know. Basically, like I said, they got a chuckle out of this, because of the fact that the main thing they laughed about or got a chuckle out of is Ken Penders saying he's going to talk to several contributors, writers, and artists, that worked on the Archie Sonic book to see whether or not they will want to work with him to make this happen. Now, he's already gone on record, Ken Penders, and they did allude to this, that he's met with Scott Shaw, one of the first writers and artists on the book. The Archie Sonic comic book, that is. And it sounds like maybe he's going to get something worked out with Scott. Not entirely sure. But when it comes to the other principal players in, this situation, like Carl Bollers, and most importantly, Ian Flynn, among others, that's when things will get a little interesting, a little dicey, if you will. You see, even though word is that, depending on who you believe, word is that Carl and Ken have kind of worked out their differences, depending on which side you believe, on that matter, basically they feel, the guys over at Sonic Speed, basically they feel that Ken trying to get Carl to, come on board with this, idea is, basically a no-win situation. Like, Carl might, again, depending on who you believe, might have buried the hatchet with Ken, but Carl is also the kind of guy that would, sit Ken down and say, Ken, you're taking a big risk here, a risk that could land you behind bars or cause you to financially lose everything. Which, is true. It is indeed true. Now, Carl isn't the only one that, they got a chuckle out of as to, Ken trying to get on board with this. The other person, which could lead to said legal situation, legal lawsuits and whatever, is Ian Flynn, because of his connection with Sega. And if Ken Penders approaches him to try to get him to come on board, that could pretty much be the end for Ken, if you will. That could be pretty much the end of any opportunity to make this a reality. And that's why they asked the question, will he get away with this? And here's the thing. You might think you're in the clear, but in the end, you'll find out you're not. Let me tell you from experience. Okay? There was a situation at one of my ex-jobs long ago that I was a part of. And it was mainly my fault. And at the end of the day, it cost me my job. Now, was I sad about it? Yes. But for a while, me and a group of people thought, hey, we're in the clear, nothing's going to happen, we're all good to go. Basically what we didn't know, or we forgot about, is there are cameras on the roof, security cameras. And that they are not just watching the customer's every move, they're watching your every move as an employee. So what we thought, was passable and basically something that we could get away with, we eventually got caught. And by getting caught, myself and the others ended up losing our job, at the place of our employment. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, and how it relates and correlates, I should say, with the question these guys are asking, is right now, Ken Penders might think, hey, I'm in the clear. I can do this Lara-Su Chronicles Beginnings with the Mobius Years Later reprints in them to add to the continuity to kind of, get people up to speed, even with an alternate ending. Ken might think he's in the clear with that. But sooner or later, he might be in for a shock. Because if he's determined to go through with doing the same thing with the entire Archie Sonic book, that's when things could and probably will catch up to him. Because it only takes one moment, or in this case, one interaction, and it pretty much could be his downfall. So, will Ken Penders get away with it? Right now, it seems that he is. But if I'm Ken, I do not get too comfortable. Because I think the guys over at Sonic Speed said it best. Yes, sooner or later, Sega could and potentially will take him to court. Not just for what he's doing with Lara-Su, but also what he wants to try to do with Archie Sonic. Because that, again, is the bigger risk out of them all. That is the biggest risk out of them all. What he wants to do with Archie Sonic. Because basically he might try to rebrand it as, the Mobian line, or whatever he calls it, published by Floating Island Publications. But, let's be real. He can rebrand it all he wants. The main character that's focused on in those books in those stories that he wants to reprint, I should say, is Sega's mascot. It is Sega's mascot. So he has to basically, kind of think about what he wants to do. And hopefully somebody that he does meet with, whether it's Scott Shaw, whether it's Carl Bollers, maybe even Ian Flynn, whoever he meets with, hopefully they'll knock some sense into him and make him realize, look, you got away with doing what you did with the Lara-Su Chronicles, but it's another thing for you to want to try to go and get away with doing the same thing with Archie Sonic, because that could be even more risky to you and your future and you and your family and you financially. So hopefully somebody will talk some sense into him. Because as far as the Lara-Su Chronicles go, as I and others have mentioned before, there's a little bit of an interesting situation there. You see, the issues that were used, for the reprints of Mobius years later, they may have not come. They may not have come, I should say, from the actual source, from an actual comic, because of the way printed in there and even edited. And the reason for this is because apparently the person behind it, used a website called TalesKick.net to get the issues and send those downloaded copies over to Ken. So that right there is an issue in itself. And if I'm Penders, like I said earlier, I should not get too comfortable or get ahead of myself with what I want to do. Which again, as it correlates to this question that those two guys asked, will he get away with it? As of right now, he's free as a bird to do what he wants. But when it comes to the bigger plans that he has, if I'm Penders, I would second guess, my strategy. And like I said, hopefully somebody that he interacts with, that he wants to work with to make this happen, hopefully that person talks some sense into him and makes him realize, Ken, you are going to be risking everything you do this. So if I was you, I'd just back away and leave it as it is, because you're going to probably get in enough trouble with your Lara-Su deal. Hopefully, like I said earlier, somebody talks to him and mentions, something like that to have him back off. But we'll just have to wait and see. Because what Penders needs to understand, if he's basing all this maybe off what the fans are doing, what he needs to understand, and this is just my opinion, if he is basing it off what the fans are doing, what he needs to understand is the fans are doing this because because what they're doing is fan continuations. They're not basically trying to claim that this is the official continuation and like what he's trying to do or whatever. They're not trying to make money, as far as I know. They're not trying to really make money that much. Well, except for Mobius Comics and such, but still, they're not trying to make that much money. What they're trying to do is create their own continuation of the story that they feel would fit into Archie Sonic in a huge way. They're not trying to basically, redo other stories or reprint other issues or official issues and sell them as their own. They're trying to continue where the original series left off in their own way. So he needs to realize that there is a difference between what fans are doing and what he's doing, and what the fans are doing by continuing the original comic in their own way is a lot more safer and legal than what he's doing. So if he's basing his idea to, do the Lara-Su Chronicle beginnings, as he did, and then try to do the same with the entire Archie Sonic series, he needs to rethink his strategy. He needs to rethink, what what his plans are. And I do apologize for that notification there. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to probably hear some of those. But he needs to basically, in my opinion, rethink his strategy, down the line. Because right now, to answer that question, yeah, he is getting away with it. But don't get too comfortable, Ken. Because if I was you, I'd keep eyes in the back of my head. I'd be paying attention to my emails. I'd be, looking over every phone call I get on my cell phone, my mobile phone, if you will, as well as my home phone, just to make sure whether or not, or to see whether or not I might be heading to court for a lawsuit that I brought upon myself. So, so that's really all I can say on it, guys. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below. Love to hear what you guys got to say on this. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notification for content as soon as it comes out. Also, check out my Teespring store. Link will be in the description, as well as links to where you can find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube. But guys, give me your thoughts. What do you think about this whole thing? Do you think Ken is going to be able to get away with it, scot-free? Or do you think eventually he's going to have to face legal consequences? Let me know, and until then, I am out.